Welcome to Focus on Why, the podcast where reflection sparks action. I'm Amy Rowlandson, and together we'll explore compelling stories, profound insights, and transformative experiences from inspiring guests worldwide. Feeling lost or unfulfilled? Searching for clarity, purpose, or meaning in your work and life? This podcast invites you on a journey of self-discovery to align your work with your values, shape your future with intention, and create a purposeful way of life. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Before we begin, have you read my new book yet? Focus on Why, Create a Purposeful Way of Life is co-authored with my late grandfather, George Fleming Kerr, and weaves in poignant journal entries detailing his experiences and insights of the 5 years he spent in captivity during World War II. Honest and heartfelt, this uplifting guide acts as your companion for life. Available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. Check the show notes for links to get your copy today. Today on Focus on Why, I am joined by Dr. Jane Lewis. Jane, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Amy.
Well, it's an absolute privilege to have you here. My opening question is, what is it you're focusing on at the moment, Jane?
So I've just got back from Hawaii. I'm so blessed. I go there twice a year to teach and to be a little bit of a student, but most of the focus is on teaching. And what I'm teaching is Huna, which is the spiritual, energetic, and shamanistic practices of the ancient Hawaiians. So I've been studying that now for, well, best part of 30 years. And then about 20 years ago, in fact, 20 years ago, this last month, I seriously started teaching it. I'd been playing with teaching it a bit before. So that's what I've been up to, and that's what I'm focusing on.
So this has been a focus for the best part of 20 years, or 30 years, sorry. How did you get into it right at the beginning?
The very short answer is clinical depression. So back in the 90s, when I was coming up to my 40th, and after my 40th, a whole load of historic life events, which I'm happy to share, but it's a long story. A whole load of life events led me to a place where I ended up clinically depressed. And I didn't want to go down the pills route. I wanted to find a way to sort myself out. And I tried all sorts of stuff. Rebirthing, Kundalini yoga, psychodrama. You get the picture, hopefully. So I tried a load of stuff. And then somebody recommended that I try NLP because nothing was really landing and making, little dints in the problem, but nothing that really was long-standing for me. So I tried NLP. I interviewed a whole load of companies, found the company I wanted to work with, and it so happened that David Shepard, the guy whose company it was, taught NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and hypnosis, and something called timeline therapy, and he also taught something called Huna, but I had no idea what it was. I was there for the NLP, really. So started with the NLP training, and he did these occasional 90-minute sessions where he trained us or taught us some of the aspects of Huna, the Hawaiian spiritual healing techniques, particularly focusing on the self-healing. And I found it worked, and it was helpful, and it was useful. So I always say NLP set me on the road out of clinical depression, but it was Huna, particularly the how to release your baggage stuff and the Ho'oponopono, the forgiveness stuff, that really, to be honest, has kept me out of depression. Because if any of your listeners have ever been diagnosed with it, one of the things they may be told, and I hope they're not, but they may be told, I was, is that clinical depression can return. I had my diagnosis in, 97, 98. I can honestly say I have never, ever been back in that state since. And I really do put that down to the practice of Huna.
And it sounds like because you've been practicing this and teaching this for so many years, twice a year, there hasn't been a space for the clinical depression to arise.
No, that's probably true, although I think it depends on circumstances. My mum had dementia, she had Lewy body dementia, and in her case, it got a bit horrific at one point because she got violent. I mean, she was tiny by then, but she got violent with me, and she had some pretty horrific hallucinations. And I always said if anything was going to kick me back into clinical depression, it would have been that. And certainly, I was doing the forgiveness process with her several times a day, but and I was sad. I was a bit sad, but there's a huge difference between experiencing grief and sadness than experiencing clinical depression. It's a massive, massive difference.
And you mentioned I'm going to try and say it, Ho'oponopono.
Very good.
Oh, it is tricky,
It is tricky.
but forgiveness is also tricky. Explain more about how that has folded into your everyday, that practice.
So I think the first thing to say, if anybody has heard of Ho'oponopono, the chances are that they've heard of it through the forgiveness prayer and the work of Joe Vitale. The way I teach it and practice it is a little different. There are as many versions of Ho'oponopono, Hawaiian forgiveness, as there are probably Hawaiian families in the islands. It is very much a fundamental part of Hawaiian culture, and different people practice it in slightly different ways. From a Hawaiian perspective, there are three main ways that you can do forgiveness. One is you have a conversation with the person, and that's what they use a lot in families and in companies, situations where you've got a group of people who are involved in the problem. You would definitely talk it out, and you might, on a one-on-one basis, like if you and I had some kind of conflict, we might talk it out one-on-one. So there's the talking it out. Then there's doing it internally, where you're not talking it out. And the third way is a combination of the two, because sometimes when you do the internal process, you realize that there is action you need to take, like physically go and have the conversation with the person, say, I'm really sorry, I did this, I know it hurt you, I need to say this to you face to face. But most of my work now, in both with myself and with clients, it's doing it the internal way. So the idea is that everything should be forgiven, but that forgiveness does not mean condoning. It does not mean accepting bad behavior. And you certainly don't have to like the person or continue to have anything to do with them after you've done the forgiveness process. And I think that's one of the big differences. I think a lot of people think of forgiveness as, oh, well, it's all very, I forgive them, but I still know what they did, and I don't really want to be around them. But yeah, so no, you can choose to have absolutely nothing to do with them. So it's actually got quite a lot of bite because it's not easy. And the way I teach it, you say to the person, I forgive you, please forgive me. So it's a two-way process. And the thinking behind that is we never know we never know how we might have hurt somebody. So for instance, I was once coaching on a NLP master practitioner course, and they had to do an open book exam, and they had to get 100% in their open book exam. And as a coach on the course, I would work with a couple of people to get them through. And there was this one guy, and oh, we struggled. It was really, really hard. He wouldn't put the work in, he was resistant, it was really hard. But finally we did it. And he got his 100% and he got his certificate. And he came up to me at the end and he said, Jane, I'd like to thank you for your help. He said, but I have to tell you something. He said, I found it really difficult working with you. I noticed. He said, yes, because you remind me of my school dinner lady. Who knew? I mean, you don't. So very often, a way we look, our tone of voice, something triggers something in the other person, and we have absolutely no awareness of it. So the idea that, yes, forgiveness needs to be a two-way process, or even, it might even be forgive me, you hurt me, but forgive me for having deep feelings of revenge for the last 15 years. Forgive me for that. As I say, it's not easy, but it's very, very liberating.
I hear you. And one of the things that I have discovered around forgiveness is that people don't know that that's what they're looking for as a solution.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. It's funny because I'm trying to do more speaking work. And I had my keynote speech, and it was all about forgiveness. And then I was talking to Maria Francione, who's you obviously know her, but a booker of speakers, a real guru as far as that's concerned. And she said, forgiveness is a solution. You've got to identify the problem or a problem that forgiveness is a solution for. And so I'm talking a lot more about toxic workplaces and toxic relationships. Toxicity has very long fingers because if you don't deal with the situation, it will come back and bite you in the bum. So it's forgiveness as a solution to that. For a lot of women that I work with, one of the challenges that they have coming out of both abusive relationships and toxic workplace situations is I'm an intelligent woman, I'm well educated. How the hell did I allow myself to get in that situation in the first place? And a lot of shame. And the forgiveness process, as well as some of the other Huna process, is really powerful for dealing with shame.
I know Maria. She came on the podcast a while back now, episode 222, in fact, The Future of Speaking. So, yes, thank you for sharing her shift or reframe, because it is so key that we often focus on a topic but don't necessarily connect it to where people are right now. We're looking at the solution. Absolutely. Jane, how are you perceived when you travel across the other side of the planet to connect with the practice of Huna by the Hawaiians?
So that's a really interesting question. So you've got some Hawaiians who regard it as cultural appropriation and are not happy about it. But the people that my mentors, who were Hawaiian, now dead, they felt, and there were several of them, they felt that these particular teachings are really important and they need to be shared with the world. And yes, historically, it was dangerous to share. It was illegal to share any kind of spiritual tradition associated with an indigenous culture, whether you were Native American or whether you were Hawaiian or I think Guam, other places that are in the American domain. It was actually illegal. So just not a good idea to share. That time has passed, and the tradition was sent underground because the practices were not appreciated. They didn't conform with the missionary idea of Christianity. And I guess there was probably political reasons as well why you would, that's what oppressors do. They drive cultures underground. And at the time when Captain Cook arrived, it was a very thriving culture across the Hawaiian Islands. And then King Kamehameha united the islands and set up a kingdom. And there was a kingdom for decades until the Western powers started coming. Hawaii is very conveniently placed if you happen to be a Western power, like America, who ended up with it, Britain, France, and Russia. Those were the main ones that were really interested in it. So I think there was politics as well, but there was a driving underground, and the last queen of Hawaii was put under house arrest, and her kingdom was taken from her. Now, actually, Huna is a religion, and the Hawaiians wouldn't call it Huna. Huna is a Hawaiian word, but it was a name given by a non-Hawaiian who had gone to Hawaii, and a guy called Max Freedom Long. He went to Hawaii and got interested in these secret things that people were doing and they wouldn't talk to him about. So he called it huna, which means secret. I think the Hawaiians themselves would probably have called it ho'omanaloa, which is ho'o means to make. So ho'oponopono, you got ho'o, it means to make. Mana is life force energy, and loa means to spread out. So mana loa is the highest vibrational form of energy there is. So it's about how do you use and utilize that highest form of vibrational energy. That would be a more appropriate word, really. But the name Huna was given and the name Huna was kept. But in fact, those practices, it was a religion. And then in, I think it was 1819, 1820, the then queen decided to knock down all the temples because she could see what was coming. So they knocked down the temples. They said, this is not a religion anymore. So it becomes spiritual practices. And it is shamanistic. They don't do the heavy drugs. So there's no equivalent of ayahuasca, for example. Depending where you are in Polynesia, it's either known as kava or ava, which is a root which has an effect a little bit like novocaine. So if you take it, then your mouth area and your nose tends to go a bit numb. It gives a kind of clarity, but it's not very intoxicating. It's not intoxicating. It doesn't leave you woolly headed, and it's not addictive. It really isn't in the class of, as I say, the likes of ayahuasca or mescaline or some of these more interesting herbs and plants that people can take on in the shamanistic traditions. But it is shamanistic in the sense that you work with the elements. You're working to one of the objectives is to change your experience of reality so that you're really in tune with yourself, the planet and everyone on it, and God. Kia kua.
Wow. Jane, what I'm hearing here is this such deep connection for the practice and for this way of life. When you're not there, do you find it difficult to almost live a dual life?
Not really. I think I've probably adapted some of the way that I use Huna. One of the things they talk about is the connection with the land. And the feel of the land in Hawaii is very different from the feel of the land here in UK. It's a much younger land. It's literally popping up. I mean, it is literally growing as we speak. There's another island coming into being. It'll take a long time, but it is growing. Whereas the land here is falling into the sea in some places. So it does have a different feel energetically. Plus the fact, certainly on Big Island, which is where I go, you are on an active volcano, and it's being particularly active at the moment. In fact, when I was there, I think the Friday that I was there, it erupted. It erupts. It'll erupt for a couple of hours or maybe a day or two, and then it goes quiet, and then it has another eruption. For the first 20 years that I went there, it never it leaked, but it didn't pop. But now it pops. So the energy, it's a crystalline rock structure somewhere floating around in the middle of the Pacific. It's a very different kind of energy than the energy of this land. The weather's very different. The plants that are available are very different. So, yes, I do act and behave and relate to the land differently here. But this is definitely my land. I had my DNA done, and I think I'm 99% Northern European and 1% Asiatic, as they call it. So I'm very much from here, not from there. I do bring, I have my own little tea leaves, which are tea, that's TI, not TEA, which are a fundamental part of the Hawaiian culture. So if I'm doing an event, I'll take a few tea leaves off my tea leaf plant and take them with me. but I chant. I do that there. I do that here. That's no difference. The practice is the way I'm practicing Ho'oponopono or the baggage release or meditation, no different there than here. It's more the there are things that are just not available here. They don't grow. So because we do quite a bit of Hawaiian arts and crafts, and we learn a little. I'm by no means great at all this, but we learn, how to weave stuff and work with dried leaves and work with tea leaves a lot more than I possibly can because my little tea leaf plant has only so many leaves to give me. But the tea leaf was very, very important in the Hawaiian culture, still is. They use it for cooking, so they wrap food in it. If you've got a fever, you put it on your forehead. They use it to define property boundaries and to keep unwanted energies out of the property. It's got the sort of spiritual connection, a practical connection, a food connection. It's a very wonderful plant.
And it's really interesting, this connection with hands and the plant, to be able to have this tactile relationship with it. And I've always thought about how I'm either using my brain or I'm using my hands in my work. And I love being in the garden. And I've recently talked about the importance of the different types of plants. It was after a talk I heard back in 2024 with Steve Buston, where he drew a fabulous metaphor between trees and weeds and perennials and a different understanding of how they can relate into your business. And here I am hearing from you the role of this particular tea leaf and how it represents so much. And it is very much a physical representation here in using it, using your hands and being very hands on in this way of life. And I do feel that there is a disconnect with the environment in the UK, in Europe, in the Western world, between our land and our physical selves.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. One of the things that I do love about Huna and the Hawaiian approach is this idea that if you want to be, and to take the idea a little bit further, if you want to be pono, so pono, as in ho'oponopono, pono means to be right. So it's calm, centered, grounded, at peace with yourself, at peace with the world. So if you want to truly be pono, then those are the three things. It's being pono with yourself, pono with the land and the people, the planet and the people on it, and pono with God. So it's that three prong. That is the path to inner peace, to just that that inner well-being and external well-being. Because if you are, I was going to say if you're well-beinged, no, if you're well internally, you will be well externally. Because there's that the mind body connection is very much a part of what we teach. And actually, there's three. There's the mind, there's the body, and there's the higher self, which is your connection to spirit or source. So aligning those three, and the land for the Hawaiians was very much a crucial part. Alignment with the land and connection with the land, because if you think about it, they're small island. They're also, I mean, the big island, which is the biggest, you can drive around that in a day without too much sweat. They're small islands, and you're dependent on the land and, of course, the water around. The Hawaiians were great fisher, the great fisher people, and they have calendars. They have moon calendars, depending, and they have a different name for each day of the moon in a 28-day cycle, and different moon days. That would be when you plant taro, or that would be when you fish for tuna, or that would be when you do not do anything. And it's all to do with the moon cycle.
Oh, I love that. How does purpose feature? Is there a word for it separately, or is it as you've just described, this alignment?
I think the main purpose is the idea of alignment. There is the notion, the Hawaiian, in the Huna, there is a belief in reincarnation. The idea that we we come back. We may not. We may have done the journey, may be done, but there is the idea that we do come back. And one of the ideas is that before our soul comes back into whatever lifetime it's coming into, and this is not just Tuna, you find this in many traditions, that it makes a contract and your soul, consults a higher council, so a council of guides, and decides what are the lessons that need to be learnt in this lifetime. And that then really determines the purpose, because the lessons and the purpose have to go hand in hand. There's no point in just having a purpose for the sake of having a purpose. It needs the Hawaiians are so practical. It needs to accomplish something. And the accomplishing something is learning the lessons so that next time round it has a different journey, or it's done and it goes into the soup never to emerge.
And hand in hand, your version of purpose, how does it align with the Hawaiian version?
So my purpose, and which I used to think it was just teaching and I didn't want it to be teaching, but there you go. And I did a higher council exercise, probably a couple of years ago, not that long ago, within the last 5 years. And it came back really clearly that my purpose is teaching healing through ancient wisdom, which is what I do. But the lessons that I have had to learn along the way, I wouldn't have gone down the Huna route if I hadn't ended up with clinical depression. I was very anti-spiritual at that point. I mean, I grew up my mum and dad were Christians. My dad was church organist, so we went to church. They weren't evangelical, but they were definitely Christian. I did classical Arabic as my first degree. I studied the Quran, read the Quran in the original. So I was interested, but it was an intellectual interest, not a deep felt, heartfelt, soul felt interest in the idea of spirituality. And for years, that was the way it was. It was intellectually fascinating. How does religion come into being? Yeah, what do people do with faith? But it was very intellectual. If my life hadn't imploded and I hadn't gone down the clinical depression route and found other solutions weren't working, NLP, and the person I chose happened to teach this very esoteric form of spirituality, yeah, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I probably would be helping people and teaching people and so forth, but I'd be doing it with NLP. I wouldn't be doing it with in this spiritual context. I wouldn't be doing it with ancient wisdom, because I love NLP, but it's not really ancient wisdom.
And you said you used to think it was just teaching and you didn't want it to be teaching. There was almost a disappointment in that admission of teaching and healing through ancient wisdom. What did you want it to be?
Anything but teaching. So when I was 16, my dad was a teacher, my mum was a nurse. And when I was 16, my dad sat me down and he said, "Jane, if you ever want to make any money, don't be a teacher and don't be a nurse." And my 16-year-old self took that on fully on board. So the first time I attempted to identify my life's purpose, I had a breakthrough session with my NLP teacher, the objective of which was to figure out my life's purpose. And we did various exercises and processes and so on and so forth. And at the end of 3.5 hours, he said, "So, Jane, what's your purpose?" And it just came out, "Teaching." And I nearly threw up. I really was that committed to not teaching. And then I sat down and thought about it, thought, well, I am a coach, that's a form of teaching. And I do train people, and that's a form of teaching. But I was very so again it that I tried various other ways of finding a purpose that wouldn't be teaching. I was resistant.
And the advice had been that if you ever had wanted to earn money, don't be a teacher, don't be a nurse. Was the earning money for you a critical part of this?
It was when I was younger, yes. I was very mercenary when I was younger. nowadays, to be honest, I'm so, as long as I have to live enough to live on, I'm not that bothered by money. But I would say in my teens, 20s, 30s, yeah, I was pretty mercenary. Money seemed very, very important.
Yeah. So that was the visceral reaction, that the physical repulsion that you felt, the being sick, to that response of, oh my goodness, no, it can't be that. It has to be anything but.
Yes. Was literally anything but. I think it was also influenced. As I said, my dad was a teacher, and in my gap year, he was running a British school in Brazil, and in my gap year, I did some teaching for him because he didn't know quite what else to do with me. So I taught swimming and drama, and one of the things that would happen was these needy little 8-year-olds. I was 17, but these needy little 8-year-olds would come and hang on to my hand and Miss Jane, Miss Jane, and I was like, to get away from me. So I think that also contributed to the visceral reaction because my idea of teaching was, yes, teaching little kids. So I think that had a part to play in it.
So this alignment, now that you're more comfortable to step into with the teaching and the healing through the ancient wisdom, and the fact that you are 99% Northern European with that 1% maybe from elsewhere, you believe, well, the belief in reincarnation, could it be that that 1% is quite a dominant one?
It could well be. It could well be.
I mean, that's just a genetic, physical being, but the reincarnation, does that manifest in different ways?
Yeah, I mean, I have had a couple of past life experiences. So I had one at Stonehenge. That was very profound. I was in a workshop, and we were able to go into Stonehenge. There was a group of us. If you book, you can go in early before the visitors, and you can actually go into the stones rather than lurk around the railings. So we were actually in among the stones, and somebody came up to me and said, "Jane, that stone's told me to go and talk to you and call you over." And I thought, really? So it would be rude not to. And I had an experience where I literally vanished into the stone, and I was standing on Salisbury Plain before they'd ever been built. And then I had another one where I was a Polynesian navigator. So who knows?
Wow, that's so cool. I mean, it really is. I find it fascinating to have these moments and to hear about these moments, these different experiences. And have you made much of them, of those, in terms of applying meaning to them?
No, not really. Because some people, when they have past life experiences, they get a really clear sense of what was the lessons and why in this lifetime they're having the experience. So unresolved conflict in a past life where you were the student and the person you had the conflict with was the guru or the master. And then in this life, they're your brother or your father or your mother or yeah, so that because you need to work this karmic pattern out. With mine, I've never had a sense of what the karmic patterns might be that I need to work out in this lifetime. I've had plenty else on my plate in this lifetime, so conflict with me has been it's kept me busy. My own conflict with myself has kept me very busy.
Yeah, leave that for someone else to unravel in a future time. Oh, Jane, what a conversation. It's been beautiful. This different version of purpose has certainly been brought to this episode. So thank you for sharing why you do what you do. Even if it has been at times a reluctant stepping into, it does certainly feels that you are so aligned with your work. It's more the reluctance of the title as opposed to anything else. But yeah, the concept and what you do is wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on.
How would someone reach out and connect with you? What's the best way for them to do that?
So, I mean, there's, Facebook and LinkedIn in the usual ways. I'm either Dr. Jane Lewis or Jane P. Lewis. Jane Lewis is a very common name, so you have to find ways of distinguishing yourself. Or email me, jane@drjanelewis.com. I have a YouTube channel, Secret Art of Huna, Huna. So they can find me there, or message me on, as I say, LinkedIn, or because I'm sure they can. If they're connected with you, they'll be connected with me through you.
I love that. The secret art of Huna, or the secret art of secret, essentially, isn't it? Fabulous. Dr. Jane Lewis, thank you so much for coming on the show. Do you have some final words, please, for the listener?
I think we underestimate the power of forgiveness. We really do. It's such a healing force. It's difficult, but when you really can get to grips with it, it's such a healing force, a healing power. So if you take nothing else away from today's call, do some forgiving. I was struggling with forgiving Donald Trump. And I sat and thought about, well, what might Trump's purpose be? And I came to the conclusion that his purpose is that we become complacent in the West, and his purpose is to disrupt. And once I realized Trump's purpose as a disruptor, maybe truth, maybe not, but this is my model of the world, I was able to forgive him.
This episode's over, but let's keep the conversation going. How has this episode impacted you? Share your insights, takeaways, and reflections with actions on social media, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Your feedback creates powerful ripple effects, helping others to discover its value. Want to dive deeper into purpose? Check the show notes for links on how to work with me, where to buy my new book, Focus on Why, Create a Purposeful Way of Life, available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook, and where to sign up for Friday Focus, my weekly newsletter. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.